You've seen the glamorous brochures, pools on every deck, endless buffets, smiling crew who seem to know your name. But behind the curtain, there's a version of cruise life you were never meant to see. Former cruise staff are now spilling the secrets passengers aren't supposed to know. And trust me, once you hear them, you'll never look at your vacation the same way again. From tracking systems to shady free perks, it's time you see what actually happens at sea. So let's dive in. Secret number 1 is already watching you. 1. Your cruise card tracks everything. You probably think of your cruise card as just a room key or a convenient way to pay for drinks. But behind the scenes, it's actually a full-blown tracking device. And I don't mean that in a sci-fi way. Former crew members confirm that every time you tap your card at the bar, casino, spa, or when boarding and leaving the ship, it logs your location and action in a central system. That data builds a digital profile of you, often used to tailor your experience or flag your behavior. One former guest services agent said they could instantly pull up a passenger's entire spending history, late returns from excursions, even complaints filed, all in seconds. And sometimes that profile gets passed to other departments. So while one passenger might mysteriously get offered free drinks or a better table at dinner, another might find their onboard account quietly limited without actually knowing why. Why does this matter? Because how the system sees you can affect how the crew treats you. VIPs often get fast-tracked for perks, while red flag guests are quietly managed behind the scenes. The best move? Treat your card like a digital passport. Keep tabs on your own activity using the cruise line's app. Be polite, settle your bills on time, and don't cause a scene. You never know who's watching or what your card has already said about you. 2. The casino machines are rigged. Sort of. You walk into the ship's casino thinking it's just a fun little detour, maybe a few slots or a round or two at the blackjack table. What most passengers don't realize is that cruise ship casinos aren't held to the same strict regulations as land-based ones. In fact, once the ship hits international waters, those machines are essentially under the cruise line's full control. One ex-casino staffer I spoke with admitted that payout percentages on slot machines can be adjusted remotely by supervisors, especially if the casino needs to boost revenue that night. So after a big winter promotion, they might tighten the odds without telling a soul. On land, casinos are audited. On cruise ships, it's the Wild Wild West. Passengers assume they're getting a fair shot, but the reality is, slot machines on board are programmed to favor the house even more aggressively. Sure, someone wins here or there, that's part of the show, but the real money comes from repeat players who feed the machines daily, thinking one more spin will actually change their luck. So what's the fix? Think of cruise casinos as entertainment, not opportunity. If you're going to play, set strict limits and walk away when it's gone. And if you want better odds, stick to simple table games like blackjack, where the math is more in your favor. Bottom line, don't expect Vegas fairness when you're floating in the middle of the ocean. Before we continue, if you find these sort of tips helpful, give us a subscribe and a thumbs up. Helps us keep the lights on around here. Now, back to the video. 3. Crew members know what you're doing before you do it. It might sound a little creepy, but crew members often know who you are before you even introduce yourself. This isn't magic, it's strategy. When you book your cruise, your profile begins building. The moment you tap that cruise card for a drink or spa treatment, your preferences are quietly tracked. And the crew? They're trained to use that info. A former bartender once said he was expected to memorize the names and go-to drinks of high-spending guests before the first formal night even began. It wasn't just about good service, it was targeted hospitality. Similarly, spa staff knew who booked massages and who didn't tip. Guest services knew who complained often and who caused scenes. All that info floats between departments in a kind of unofficial passenger profiling system. Why? So they can prioritize time, manage risk, and, let's be honest, protect their sanity. There were even cases where staff passed private notes warning each other about particularly difficult passengers. But here's the catch. Your behavior early on sets the tone. Crews are more likely to go above and beyond for kind, respectful passengers, even slipping them little perks like preferred seating or surprise desserts. So be nice, tip fairly, and say thank you. You'd be surprised how far a smile and good manners go when everyone else is just acting entitled. Remember, you're being observed more than you realize, and kindness, that's one data point the crew actually respects. 4. Most of the food isn't made fresh on board. That beautiful buffet spread, the endless trays of scrambled eggs, pastries, and pasta, it might look gourmet, but behind the scenes, it's a logistical operation powered more by efficiency than culinary excellence. A former cruise kitchen worker shared that nearly 60% of the food served on board, especially in buffets and room service, is pre-cooked, vacuum-sealed, or frozen long before it hits your plate. That includes everything from lobster tails to chicken curry. Most of it's prepped on land weeks in advance, shipped in bulk, and stored in massive freezers below deck. Why? Because cruise ships serve thousands of meals daily in a space smaller than most restaurant kitchens. Fresh ingredients for every dish just isn't practical, so presentation is prioritized. A frozen lasagna gets plated with herbs. Powdered eggs get fluffed and dyed. A thawed croissant is warmed to feel just baked. This isn't meant to scare you, it's standard practice. But knowing the reality helps you make smarter dining choices. For example, many crew members recommend skipping scrambled eggs at the buffet. They're often powdered or from liquid cartons, and instead going for made-to-order stations like omelets, pasta bars, or stir-fry spots. If you're craving something fresher, try a specialty restaurant on board. Those kitchens are smaller, less rushed, and often cook more to order. Sure, it might cost a little extra, but sometimes it's worth to know your steak didn't start the day in a plastic pouch. 5. Lost items? It's not always what you think. You'd think that if something goes missing on a cruise ship, a wallet, phone, even a piece of jewelry, there'd be a full-scale investigation. Security footage, staff interviews, the works. But according to former cruise security officers, that's rarely the case. Unless the item is extremely valuable or the situation involves violence or theft with a clear suspect, many missing items are quietly ignored. One ex-security team member said that in most cases, guests who report stolen items are simply asked to double-check their cabin and maybe file an insurance claim later. The reason? Cruise lines want to avoid panic, bad press, and delays. A theft scandal can ruin the vacation atmosphere and future bookings. Sometimes theft does happen, but there are frequent false alarms too. Guests who forget where they left something or even try to fake a loss for compensation. But because of that, even genuine cases can get brushed aside. So how do you protect yourself? First, always use your in-room safe for anything valuable: cash, passports, jewelry, etc. Second, avoid leaving personal items unattended in public spaces like lounges or pool decks. And here's a tip: before you board, take photos of your suitcase contents. If something does go missing, you'll have proof for your claim. Bottom line, don't assume lost means gone forever. But don't expect CSI Cruise Ship Edition either. Prevention is your best defense when you're sailing thousands of miles from the nearest police station. 6. Excursions aren't always safe. One thing I learned quickly working on board: just because an excursion is sold through the cruise line doesn't mean it's automatically safe. Most passengers assume that if the cruise is offering it, everything's vetted: the gear, the guides, the routes. But that's not always true. Many excursions are run by third-party operators, and while some are excellent, others barely meet safety standards. I've seen guests come back from ATV tours scraped up and shaken, or snorkeling trips where no one checked the life vest and the current was way too strong for a beginner. One time, a family came back furious because their eco hike turned out to be a rough, unmarked trail with one guide for 30 people, and he got them all lost. Crews get warned not to speak negatively about these trips, but we often whisper to each other which excursions to avoid. Some ports also have a reputation. If you're in a country with weak regulations, you're rolling the dice. The safest bet? Research the tour company yourself before you book, especially if it sounds too adventurous to be true. Sometimes you're better off skipping the cruise-sponsored option and going with your local operator that's better reviewed. Just don't assume cruise approved means totally safe. 7. Free perks are just a sales pitch. If you've ever been lured by phrases like free drinks, complimentary Wi-Fi, or included excursions, I've got news for you. Most of the time, you're paying for it. It's just not how you think. These perks are built into the cruise fare or marked up elsewhere. For example, one guest told me how thrilled she was about getting a free beverage package with her booking. What she didn't realize was that her room costs hundreds more than the exact same one on another deck without the perk. She could have bought the drinks a la carte and saved money, but the free offer made it sound like a deal. Cruise marketing plays on psychology. Free makes you feel like you're winning, but as crew, we're trained to upsell these packages constantly. Behind the scenes, they're just bundled pricing schemes to inflate your base fare. Even things like free shore excursions often mean one heavily restricted tour that's less exciting than the paid options. It's not illegal, it's just smart marketing. But it's designed to make you feel like you're getting an exclusive treatment, when in reality, you're often getting the standard product with a shinier label. If you really want to save money, compare the prices of your cruise without perks to the price with them. Do the math. 9 times out of 10, the freebie ends up costing you more in the long run. 8. You're not always getting what you paid for. Ever notice how some guests book the same room type but end up with very different experiences? That's because not all cabins in the same category are equal, and cruise lines count on the average passenger not realizing that. I've seen ocean view rooms with a full window and others with a tiny porthole tucked behind a lifeboat, both booked as the same category. Technically, they're not lying, but it's far from the glossy pictures in the brochure. Even things like balcony cabins can be misleading. Some balconies are completely obstructed. Others are so narrow you can't even sit on a chair without bumping into the glass. I once had a guest show me her deluxe balcony that was barely big enough to stand on. She paid a premium and was furious when she saw her neighbor's room had triple the space. Dining perks work the same way. Not every included restaurant's open to every passenger. And shows, sometimes reserved seating just means first come, first served in a different line. As crew, we weren't allowed to acknowledge these discrepancies, but the seasoned guests knew to request certain room numbers, certain decks, and even certain dining times based on past experience. If you're booking, don't just look at the room type, look at the deck plan. Check photos of the exact cabin number if you can find it. Otherwise, you might end up paying for a luxury experience and getting the leftover scraps. 9. Crew cabins are nothing like what you see. Cruise commercials love to show off smiling crew members with cozy shared spaces, doing karaoke in the off time, and eating in cheerful staff lounges. In reality, crew cabins are a whole other world entirely. I lived below deck for a year, and let me tell you, it is not glamorous. Most of the cabins are tiny, like you can touch both walls while lying down kind of tiny. I shared mine with another crew member, and we had bunk beds, 1 locker each, and barely enough space to stand at the same time. There's no natural light ever. We would go days without seeing daylight. Some days, your only sense of time came from the meal schedule. Bathrooms were shared between rooms. Laundry had to be done on rotation, and forget silence. Noise from the engine room, pipes, and hallway chatter was constant. Even though we worked 10 to 14-hour days, rest was not guaranteed. Still, we made the most of it. Friendships formed fast, and we learned to laugh through the exhaustion. But the divide between crew and guests was sharp, especially when passengers complained about their rooms being small. If you ever get a peek behind the scenes, just know that smiling crew you see every day is working through heat, exhaustion, and zero privacy just to make your vacation unforgettable. 10. There's a hidden VIP list you didn't know about. You may think loyalty programs or suite upgrades are the top of the food chain, but there's a whole other level most passengers never hear about: the hidden VIP list. These aren't just diamond-level members or people who book the biggest suites. These are guests flagged by corporate ahead of time: influencers, cruise reviewers, travel agents with reach, or people who've made major complaints in the past. They get the white glove service without even asking for it. I remember one guest who caused a huge scene on a previous sale. She was marked as high sensitivity, and on her next cruise, staff were briefed before she even boarded. Her meals were double-checked, her cabin was upgraded, and she was personally escorted to her excursions. Then there were the travel bloggers, some with barely 5,000 followers who still got champagne delivered on arrival, comp services, and backdoor invites to crew-only events. As staff, we weren't told why certain passengers were on the list. We just knew they were VIPs, and any issue involving them had to go straight to management. Their reviews had power, and the cruise lines knew it. So if you've ever felt like someone else is getting extra special treatment and you don't know why, they probably are. You just weren't supposed to notice. 11. Medical emergencies are far more common than you think. Most passengers imagine cruise ships as endless fun, buffets, pools, ports, but behind the scenes, medical emergencies happen far more often than you'd expect. Former crew members say it's not unusual for the onboard medical team to treat everything from heart attacks and severe allergic reactions to broken bones from slips and falls. Ships are equipped with small medical centers, but they're not full hospitals. If something serious happens, the ship might have to divert to the nearest port, which could mean hours or even days away. Crews aren't allowed to discuss these incidents openly because it could alarm passengers and harm the ship's reputation. You might notice sudden course changes or hear a Code Alpha announcement. That's the discreet signal for a medical emergency. Many workers say they've had to carry stretchers through passenger hallways in the middle of the night, while most guests sleep peacefully, completely unaware someone else's vacation just became a nightmare. 12. The crew-only buffet is completely different. Passengers are told they have access to all the ship's dining options, but that's not the whole truth. Former crew staff reveal there's an entirely separate dining system for the crew, and it's nothing like the guest buffets. Forget gourmet steaks or chocolate fountains. Crew meals are basic, repetitive, and built for efficiency. Often, food's served in huge metal trays, and menus rotate on a strict cycle. You might get rice and chicken 5 days in a row with small variations. This isn't about cutting costs for crew, it's about feeding hundreds of staff quickly so they can get back to work. Interestingly, crews say their leftover food from passenger buffets is sometimes repurposed for their meals, within safety guidelines, of course. And while guests see food as part of the luxury, for crew it's just fuel to survive long hours. Some workers secretly dream of treating themselves in the passenger restaurants, but that's only possible if they're off duty and get special permission, which is rare. The crew knows way more than they let on, and some secrets, they stay hidden for a reason. Oh, and if this peeled back the curtain even a little for you, hit subscribe. We've got way more crew secrets coming soon.